Welcome to another episode of the Swamp247 Podcast. I am your host, Graham Hall, joined once again by my co-host, Zach Goodall, and we are here to break down Florida's disappointing 18-16 loss to the USF Bulls, a team that now has secured back-to-back ranked wins and finds themselves ranked in the AP poll at Florida's and Boise State's expense. Let's just jump right into the game. It was marked by a lot of self-inflicted wounds, missed opportunities, uncharacteristic, or depending on how you see it, characteristic penalties of the Florida Gators, a week removed from being unpenalized against Long Island. The Gators committed double-digit penalties, including 2 on the decisive final drive as USF drove down the field and converted a 20-yard field goal to win the game as clock expired in Gainesville, and USF celebrated while Billy Napier was booed as he headed off the field. We're going to jump right into it. Zach, you've been looking at the film of this contest. You're going to have more of your thoughts coming later over at Swamp247 as you once again break down the all-22 footage from Saturday afternoon's contest in Gainesville. But from being there live at Ben Hill Griffin Stadium, what stood out to you about Florida's offense, the good, but especially the bad in the Swamp on Saturday?
Yeah, as Graham alluded to, I'm going to be doing more on the all-22 at Swamp247 because I got it kind of late, so I'm still actively breaking it down. But a mix of what I've seen from that so far, as well as what we saw live and what everyone saw live. I think the best way I could put it is the Long Island game, offense and defense, special teams even, if we want to include that botched snap, the penalties, or the lack thereof against Long Island. There was none. It was not reflective of what this team is. Clearly the USF game and the track record of several years of maddening penalties, failing to execute plays, poorly designed play calls. You can really lump it all together. And I know a lot of fans have wanted to pin a lot of the struggles on Billy Napier. I see that as rightfully so in some cases. It also does fall on the players and more, I'm sure, too, on the assistants. I think it's a collective effort, the term that they like to use when things are going well, that describes why this game went so poorly. For example, the play I've just spent probably 500 or 600 words writing up, it was the 4th offensive play in the game. It was a DJ Lagway miss through and through. They should have scored on that overthrow to Tony Livingston on a leak route. Truth be told, I think it's one of the best play calls that I've seen Billy Napier make. Honestly. And I know that that's not a compliment that he receives very often, and I'm certainly not one to dish it. But it was a perfect setup against cover 3. Tony Livingston leaks out from the right side of the line, clears 2 intermediate zone defenders who were pulled in by a play action to Jaden Baugh, who had 29 yards rushing on 2 attempts before that. So they had every reason to fear him. Tony Livingston breaks wide open off of what looks like a crosser into a vertical route. DJ hitched on the throw. He hesitated. I think he was scared either of the 2 intermediate zone defenders having better reactionary time, which they did not have, or the deep safety who was pulled away by multiple routes. And he hesitated. If he didn't hesitate, he probably connects with Livingston for 25 or so yards there. But Livingston had the room to react to the safety closing, make a football move, even lower his shoulder. And in my opinion, truly, I think that could have been a touchdown and the longest passing play of the season for Florida, or for DJ Lagway at a minimum. So again, we can look toward coaching mistakes, obviously disciplinary mistakes. The 11 penalties, none remembered more than Brendan Bett spitting on Cole Skinner, the USF offensive lineman, which was absolutely crucial there on that final drive. I mean, that paired with the defensive pass interference the play before gifted USF 28 of the 87 yards that it gained on that drive for the kicker, Nico Gramatica, to go and hit a chip shot game-winning field goal. And from that point to the Livingston play, you open with 4 plays that either push you deep into the red zone or even potentially score. That is a huge surge of momentum for Florida's offense that truly we don't see them accomplish much ever, sometimes by design, sometimes by execution. That could have really, I think, altered the trajectory of the game and gotten the offense in a rhythm it could have built upon, kind of matching what USF is known for doing, for creating chunk plays, playing up tempo, and playing aggressively. They failed to do that. They took another 11 plays on that drive. And again, a mix of bad design, some conservative play calling, some bad execution, a penalty on Bryce Lovett that put them in 3rd and long. And it became the same old, same old. The Florida under Billy Napier that people know well outside of that 5-game winning streak, where they just struggled to get out of their own way. And that really, at the end of the day, is what lost Florida this game. They could not get out of their own way.
Yeah, it was initially a promising game plan, in my opinion, where Florida was establishing the run. I think Jaden Baugh had 5 rushes for 51 yards to start the game. You thought that Florida would look to wear USF's defense down, but give the Bulls some credit. They hung in there, kept the Gators out of the red zone. And when Florida got into the red zone, like you said, it was either missed opportunities or 2 touchdowns were negated by penalties. And then Florida found themselves trying to open up the passing attack downfield and just didn't have much success. You mentioned that throw by Livingston. It wasn't the only throw that I thought was a catchable ball that could have been a big play for Florida. There was the one to Vernell Brown down the sidelines, which you go back and watch that clip. That's a very, very nice throw. There's nothing to take away, in my opinion, from DJ Lagway. I'm sure Vernell will tell you that that's one he should have had, and that changes the game entirely, in my opinion, if he capitalizes there, just knowing that Florida late in the game has the lead 16-15. They have a chance to run out the clock and pick up a couple first downs, and they just were unable to do so. But a couple of just mistakes made this a game that USF was in it down the stretch. And
I would, if you don't mind me adding real quick too, like with Billy Napier, he's been known in the past, not consistently, but to come out and put a lot on the first drive that either is or looks like it could be successful, but it's running off of that script. Afterwards, there's not much creativity from his playbook that really works. I mean, like, I understand the frustration of Jaden Baugh getting those 5 carries for 50-some yards on the first drive. I think he was in the second quarter. He may have had 2 or 3 carries. So that's where I do want to assign blame to the coaching staff too, is like they lose their juice, right? When things get going. And then when Florida needs to get out of its own way, it can't do it because it's not getting the help it needs from the sidelines to make that happen.
Yeah, and Florida still had more than 100 yards of rushing, and you thought that they would lean on the rushing attack, but just going away from it, just easy to say in retrospect, just a poor decision, especially with how dominant Baugh has looked. You know, no disrespect to Jacoby Jackson, because I think he's a very capable back, but Jaden Baugh is clearly your most capable rusher, and Florida should be handing it to him double-digit times, in my opinion, in the first half alone, especially in a game like this where Florida should have the talent edge here. So that was absolutely something that stood out to me. And then obviously the missed opportunities by Lagway. He's going to continue to face scrutiny, criticism, whatever you want to call it, after he missed the previous 8 months of practice time. Only was able to practice in full 11-on-11 about 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks before the start of the 2025 season. And he does look like someone who missed out on valuable development time, reading defenses, trusting his reads, knowing when to go, knowing when to not check down, knowing when to check down. There's a lot that you can look and say, this is a quarterback who looks like it's kind of like his freshman season 2.0 in a sense, where there was a lot of promise, but still so much room to grow, and he hasn't made that growth. Now, admittedly, it is still so early in the season, and there's plenty of time for him to make strides and make improvements. And Billy Napier has continued to say that DJ Lagway has an edge. He's on a mission. He knows he can play better. And to Lagway's credit, he's a 20-year-old guy who is facing the noise and intense scrutiny on social media, on the radio, on TV, you name it. And he's coming out here and saying, I can play better. At the same time, people weren't really receptive to a lot of the comments DJ Lagway made in the aftermath, where he did say, hey, I'm going to miss some throws. It's football. There are certainly some things that, I can do better, but there's going to be some times where I'm not perfect. And for a lot of Florida fans, they've built up this expectation that DJ Lagway is going to be close to perfect as a sophomore after what they saw last season. And that is maybe an unrealistic expectation, but that's the situation that Florida finds themselves in, where they needed a sophomore quarterback to be one of the league's, if not the nation's, top passers right now for Florida to be successful. And that shouldn't be the case. Now, obviously, there were things that Florida could do on defense as well, considering Florida gave up nearly 400 yards of total offense And it's raised questions once again about the Gators' ability to defend quarterbacks who have dual threat capabilities, who can do damage on the ground. But also Florida failed to largely generate pressure consistently, which if you go back to everything we heard throughout the spring and in fall camp, one of the strengths of this team was their edge rushers, was their front seven, and they're not getting the penetration or stopping the run at the rate that Florida fans and the media thought that this team was going to be capable of. With that said, Zach, what else stood out to you about Florida's defense against the Bulls on Saturday?
No, I want to pick up exactly where you left off too, because I said it on the pod last week and it probably made me look like an idiot. I still don't think USF's interior offensive line is particularly that good. Like, I don't think that this was a result necessarily of them coming out and being worlds better than they were against Boise State. Florida's interior defensive line was not getting the job done. Edge rushers weren't getting the job done. There wasn't great contain. Byron Brown, whether it was by design or by scramble, was able to make things happen with his feet once again, and Florida was not prepared for it. I think that that one where he broke away from Jaden Woods, nearly getting him in the backfield, felt like the closest that they got to making a negative play on him when he turned to abandon the pass and use his feet. And a lot of the time, otherwise, they didn't even come close. So it was undisciplined play. There were 11 missed tackles from what we understand, which is nearly double what happened against Long Island. I know Billy Napier mentioned you want to get it to single digits and you'll probably be good. But when you're in double digits, to me, like, it doesn't matter where it is in the range. If it's low double digits or higher double digits, it's a sign of undisciplined play. They were unable to finish tackles. And Byron Brown, being the physical runner that he is, certainly made that a bit more difficult. That coverage bust, that 66-yard touchdown, I found Billy Napier's answers contradictory between Saturday and Monday. On Saturday, he said that they did not necessarily have a play call in due to the substitution in USF and its known tendency to go up tempo. I mean, they play Tennessee every year. This is the same style of offense and same attempt to make defenses be unprepared on a play-to-play basis. But in my opinion, as a coaching staff, you should be prepared for that. You should have in your back pocket designated when you know, and I know it's much more difficult than this. Like, this is probably me sounding naive, but when you've got your personnel on the field and you may not be able to make a substitution in time, you should have designated, certain coverages, certain pass rush schemes that are just your go-tos in situations like that. Florida didn't have it, and this is far from the first time that they were unprepared for a play because they didn't get a signal in time. And there was a coverage bust. Dijon Johnson, there was a good bit of separation by Keyshawn Singleton from him. And then Bryce Thornton Sharif Denson, kind of tried to undercut that pass, played it poorly. Singleton makes a great adjustment and goes. What I found contradictory is on Monday, after he said that there wasn't necessarily a play call in, Napier came out and said, actually, no, there was a play call in and that we struggled with the substitution. So what is it to me? Is that maybe you were incorrect and Ron Roberts came and told you afterwards, no, we did? Is it covering for the coaching staff? We know that Billy Napier coming out and talking about offensive play calling on Monday, saying he was irritated by the thought that it was a question by one of the reporters in the room with you on Monday, Graham. To me, it's a deflection. And now we're stuck wondering, was there a play call in or was there not? But one way or another, either the players weren't prepared because the coaching staff didn't have them in a position to be prepared literally from getting a play call, or they just weren't prepared for what, again, USF is known to do. Florida has plenty of film to study on Alex Golesh's offense. And again, experience playing Tennessee's offense, where he comes from, to where that just delays in getting your calls and getting set up, even in difficult circumstances like that, should not be something that leads to a coverage bust 66-yard touchdown. There can be gains. There can be times where you're not adequately prepared, and sometimes they'll get a play out of it. Not to that extent, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that sequence is kind of a microcosm for the frustration that a lot of Florida fans are facing. Because you go back to the first 2 years of Billy Napier's time in Gainesville, it was marked by explosive plays given up, coverage busts, miscommunication, missed assignments, where I think the Gators allowed, double-digit plays in the first half of both those seasons I just mentioned of 30 yards or more. And, there were games where Florida gave up 700 yards to LSU. It didn't matter if they were extremely potent offensively, they just couldn't stop anybody. And last year showed improvement. And then you're back to, against a perceived inferior foe, giving up explosive plays. I mean, albeit that's the only touchdown that USF scored, but it came in a situation that so many people are going to look and say that was too easy for the opponent, and it was due to our own shortcomings. You watch the play. There are guys running off the field as USF is trying to get the ball snapped. They're looking to the sidelines. That stuff should have been corrected with the player to coach communication, the green dot, the ability to have returning guys. And I know that Florida was missing, two starters really that are some of their better defensive players. Caleb Banks, we talked about the pressure that Florida could get on that interior of the offensive line that you mentioned. Caleb Banks would have been huge in a game like this, just given how he played in late November, but he hasn't been available the first 2 weeks, and Florida's relying on largely unproven guys. They're capable guys, but Jamari Lyons missed all of last season. He's coming off a compound fracture on his left ankle. Brendan Bett has been in Gainesville for 4 months, and like you said, he had 5 tackles, played 37 snaps, right? And that's a guy who is going to be, we'll see what his role is against LSU, but he got more publicized for the negative play there at the end of the game, regardless of how he played in the first 36 snaps. His final one is what everyone's going to remember. And Mekhi Barrow, he looks promising to me, but they're going to have to rotate there. And Florida was not able to consistently pressure Byron Brown, where he was able to make plays, have time in the pocket, let plays develop downfield. And he only needed that one shot to capitalize and have the Bulls find the end zone. And that's just, for Florida fans and for the coaching staff, and I'm sure for the players too, that is so frustrating, which leads me to how we are going to wrap up this podcast, because I know if you're a Florida fan listening out there, you're not trying to spend 20 plus, 30 plus minutes even hearing about all of Florida's failures and shortcomings, especially on a Tuesday afternoon as we record this podcast, where you're trying to put the game behind you. You're trying not to be frustrated anymore. And there's so much ahead of Florida that it's time to get over this and move forward. If you let the loss linger, hang over, you are going to end up suffering further defeats and disappointment. And for Florida, so much of the season left in front of them. They have to put this behind them, let it be a motivational factor, but they can't sit here and think about the disappointment. Now, in the last 48 hours, there's been so much speculation, including from people like ourselves, the media, certainly the fan bases, national pundits and analysts have been speculating about the Billy Napier era and time running out and how much longer he can last in Gainesville if this thing is not turned around. Now, obviously, you look at the schedule, and there is still plenty of time to turn this thing around. I know a lot of Florida fans, they go back to the old Jeremy Foley saying, where if you're going to do anything eventually, and I'm paraphrasing here, do it immediately, right? Last year, there were no coaching changes in the SEC. I think that's going to be different this year. There are certainly coaches who are under the microscope at various places. But you look in the SEC, Florida probably is the one that had a head coach in a tenuous position coming into the year that now looks like their seat has gotten hotter. Oklahoma looks better. Auburn looks better. We'll see what happens with Arkansas, but I think it's too soon to know whether Sam Pittman is done by the end of his 6th year in Fayetteville. Billy Napier is a different situation, where last year, a year ago, after a loss to Texas A&M, people were calling for him to be fired, including our former colleague at Swamp247, Jacob Rudner. It happened. Florida turned it around, as we know. They had promise entering the offseason in DJ Lagway, but yet they find themselves in a similar situation, coming off a loss in their first Division I contest, now tasked with doing earlier what they did a year ago in November, turning the thing around, righting the ship, making improvements. Florida now heads to Baton Rouge, what is usually an annual, some people say rivalry now, just due to how heated some of these matchups have been, really dating back to the mid-2000s. And we're in a year where sooner than later, we're going to find out if this is going to continue being an annual matchup or if it's going to be an every other year thing, due to the SEC moving to a 9-game conference schedule starting next season. But for right now, Florida will look to do what they did last year, and that's beat the Tigers, albeit a number 3 ranked team, in their home stadium, the real Death Valley, after they won that Death Valley battle at Clemson in week 1. They have the SEC's most productive quarterback from a year ago in Garrett Nussmeier. They signed the number 1 transfer portal class in the offseason, added another really talented recruiting class as well. And they have players and coaches who have spent recent time in Gainesville. Corey Raymond was on Billy Napier's initial staff as the defensive backs coach. He now is at LSU and has been doing a good job. Jack Pyburn, Jakeem Jackson transferred to LSU in the offseason, so you have some familiar relationships as well. Certainly everyone knows how the Jack Pyburn thing went at the end of the year. Him reportedly wanting, more money, a guarantee to play on third downs. Now he heads to LSU and is looking to be an impactful player in this matchup. Zach, that leads me to my point. And we're going to be back, before I ask you this, I got to say, we're going to be back in 48 hours to talk more in depth on the LSU Tigers. We've had a chance to look at the film, have a better idea of who's going to be available for this contest, with the first availability reports coming out tomorrow night, Wednesday at 8:10 p.m. Eastern. We'll know a little bit more on both teams in that game. But just big picture-wise, Zach, how important is this game for Florida? And I don't even mean just in the win-loss column, but in terms of showing improvement for the positivity surrounding the program, to give people some belief that even if they lose at LSU, that they still are going to be competitive enough to go down to Miami and compete and have a chance to win that game, to host Texas in the first week of October, or go to Texas A&M, because it's not just one game here. This 4-game stretch, in my opinion, is going to determine not just Florida's 2025 season and whether they can actually still contend for a spot in the college football playoff, but this will determine Billy Napier's future, in my opinion, in Gainesville. Zach, big picture-wise, what are you looking to see out of Florida on Saturday night? You're going to be there in Baton Rouge. What are you looking to see from Florida? What must they do to maybe restore some faith in this program and make you believe that they still can be that competitive team that a lot of people thought they were going to be before the season started?
Yeah, I view this as the most important game of Billy Napier's Florida tenure. I really do. And even understanding that LSU is the number 3 team in the country, it's in their home stadium. The odds are stacked against Florida regardless of the result of this past weekend. Like, that's just, LSU is a really good looking team. I don't necessarily know if they're still a great team yet, because their game this past weekend against Louisiana Tech, while they won, I didn't necessarily come away from it thinking that they looked as dominant as they should. And they squeaked one out against Clemson in a battle of 2 good, but maybe not as good looking teams as people thought going into the season. So all of that is to say is, I think there is a world in which Florida can be competitive in this game, even if they don't win, like you mentioned, but at least can still match up well with LSU on paper from a talent perspective. Are they going to be able to do that? Or are they going to come out without energy? Are they going to come out and look dysfunctional in ways that they did against a team that's certainly not LSU, being USF? And no disrespect to the Bulls, as we've said a couple of times now, but I think it's fair to say that they're still on different echelons, the Tigers and the Bulls at this point. If Florida comes out looking heartless, again, I view this as the most important game of Billy's tenure, because, similarly precarious spot as they were last year after the Texas A&M game, but they don't have Mississippi State in the first year of Jeff Lebby not looking good on the schedule right after that, or UCF, or a week after playing top 10 Tennessee, Kentucky. Like, Florida's difficult schedule was very difficult last year. At the same time, they had some wiggle room in that middle 4-ish games, 3 or 4 games coming out of the loss to Texas A&M. After LSU, it's another 3 top AP 16 teams on the slate. So it's not going to get any easier. This is the week where they need to bounce back. Again, even if it doesn't end in a win, considering the circumstances, they need to show some energy and some fight and make it a competitive game. Otherwise, you look at what Mississippi State did against Arizona State the other day. While it ended up being a clean game, a close game, they managed to pull out a win that not many people expected. That's if Florida comes out lifeless against LSU, there's going to be a real belief, I think, amongst Florida fans that Florida could easily turn this being 1-1 coming off a devastating loss to a few weeks from now maybe being 1-5, 2-4 maybe. And I know that that's a lot. I'm not trying to hark again too much on negatives, like we said earlier. We don't want to dampen the mood any more than it already is. But it's hard not to look at it like that. If Florida comes out and looks lifeless against LSU, truly, like, who are they going to be picked against in these next few weeks? What will the future look like for Billy Napier, especially if they come out and look totally lifeless? And if he's held on to, they continue this experiment well past this week, even if it's not going well. Again, who are they going to be picked against? This schedule, the way that it is set up to follow such a devastating loss to USF, is not kind. And as a result, that really should be all the motivation in the world for the Gators to at least put something a little more respectable on tape this upcoming Saturday.
Yeah, everyone was talking about these first two games this season being probably the most winnable games on Florida's schedule. You mentioned Mississippi State coming off a ranked win over number 12 ranked Arizona State. A lot of teams on Florida's schedule can say the same, that they look better. Florida State as well. So Tennessee's offense looks better than I expected. So this absolutely is a difficult situation for Florida. We'll know a lot more on Saturday. Florida has to look competitive. If they look sluggish or defeated in the middle of the game, people are going to say, put a fork in Billy Napier. He's lost the locker room. It's going to only get worse from here if Florida loses another game. So I agree with you. The biggest game in Billy Napier's tenure in Gainesville, the highest ranked opponent the Gators have, I think, faced. I know that Georgia was number one a couple years ago, didn't finish there. But if Florida wins at LSU, that would be the biggest ranked victory in Napier's tenure. And if they lose this game, no one's going to be saying, well, of course they played the number 3 team. Of course they lost. People are going to be saying that Florida is all but finished here unless they absolutely turn this thing around. And again, there are multiple opportunities to do so, but people are only going to further get closer and closer to the edge, maybe jump the gun a little bit and say, well, let's make the coaching hot boards, start looking ahead, see who else is out there.
That started.
Yeah, it's already started here. I put out yesterday at Swamp247 that from a Florida athletic department standpoint, it's probably premature where they're not currently debating an in-season firing. If you want more of my thoughts on that and what I've heard, go to Swamp247. And Florida has said all the right things. They're saying it's too early to panic. We can rally like we did last year. We're sticking together. They're talking amongst each other as players. They have veteran leaders who are speaking up about accountability. They're still confident, at least expressing that they're still confident, but we'll know more on Saturday. But for now, that's going to do it for this episode of the Swamp247 podcast. We'll have a ton of content coming later in the week, a preview of LSU. I'll be going behind enemy lines with Go247's Glenn West to get his thoughts on the Tigers. Zach will have breakdowns still coming of USF from the All-22 footage and of the Tigers as well. And then at the end of the week, after we have one more podcast on Thursday, look for our predictions of how this game fares. If you go back to our preseason predictions, I picked Florida to beat LSU on the road. We'll see if I stick by that prediction. I don't want to give anything away. A lot of time left in the week. But for now, that's going to do it for us. For Zach Goodall, I'm Graham Hall, and we'll see you next time.